apologize for the background noise if it's coming in on there. It's I drive a truck, so I have a refrigerated trailer and it's cooling down right now so I can get loaded. So I'm watching this case. I don't have all the names memorized, so I'm not going to say any names, but there's this case going on in Winston-Salem right now at historic Black College University. And a student was arrested for disorderly conduct. Out of curiosity, I looked up disorderly conduct. There's a point here that is being I don't know if it's being overlooked or if people just feel that it's not consequential, or I'm not sure. The person I'm actually watching on YouTube, guy named The Real Nathan Daly. He's sheriff from Georgia. I respect him. He's honest, and so it's not like, I have great respect for the guy. I watch the guy all the time, and he's really honest. But I'm watching him discuss this case, and he keeps bringing up disorderly conduct, but no one's bringing up the fact of what the definition of disorderly conduct is. Basically, disorderly conduct is a person creates a situation and incites a situation that will result in physical or verbal disturbances. The teacher was the very first one to start the disorderly conduct, but the teacher was never charged with disorderly conduct. They charged the student who, there's some semantics here, but at the end of the day, the student was defending herself against the teacher's disorderly conduct, and the student got arrested for disorderly conduct. There's some other things. I'm not even going to get into all the other things right now. I'm just talking about the disorderly conduct charge. Basically, if I come up to you and I tell you something and you give me your answer and I don't like your answer and I start yelling at you, I'm violating the law of disorderly conduct. That is exactly what the teacher did. Then the student, she starts yelling back at the teacher. Now, I find the conversation interesting because it keeps getting pointed out about the student's sense of entitlement, but nobody's talking about the teacher's sense of entitlement. The teacher is the adult here. I mean, yes, the student is an adult also. She's 20 years old, but she's a young adult. But she's not the professional adult. She's not the higher adult here. The higher adult is the one that incited this whole thing. So why is it that the teacher is entitled to incite anger, incite an argument, create a disturbance, but the person defending themselves is the only one charged with a crime? That's the problem. That's the real problem with that case. And then there's the whole other issue that comes in where, they pretty much blackmail her. They tell her, well, if you apologize to the teacher for defending yourself, we won't arrest you. That's blackmail. That's blackmail and abuse of authority. So there's all kinds of situations going on with that whole story. There's all kinds of situations going on, all kinds of abuses. Now, I'm not saying the student was right for yelling and screaming back at the teacher that was yelling and screaming at her first. If we're going to talk about disorderly conduct, where did it all start? It started with the individual that first started yelling and screaming, the teacher, the professor. The thing that bothers me about it is Everybody keeps throwing around entitlement. Oh, the student feels entitled. The student, this young adult is so entitled. What about the teacher? What about the professor? The professor felt so entitled that someone says, I'll take the grade I'm going to get, and she's not happy with that. So she starts disturbing the peace, screaming and yelling at a student, disrupting the class. All crimes, disorderly conduct. That's all in the definition of disorderly conduct. The teacher was the very first one to commit the crime of disorderly conduct. But because of social entitlement, some people are trying to make this about race. The teacher apparently isn't even white. She's not black, but she's not white either. She's brown. Her last name is Gomez, I think, or Gonzalez. She's got a Spanish last name, a Latin last name, Latino last name. So she's obviously she's not white. I mean, I look white though, but I'm not white. I'm white, black, and American Indian. I'm not even white. I just look white. When I bring up my whole family tree in pictures, I mean, it's the embodiment of the American melting pot. So she's not even white. So it's not like, this false argument of white privilege. Nobody even knows what the definition of white privilege is. They misconstrue that so much anymore. But even using the misconstrued definition of white privilege, it's not white privilege. It's social entitlement. Because here you have a professional, the officer. Let's get back to the officers. The first officer comes in, and the body cam footage isn't out yet, or at least it's not that I've found yet. I'm going to go on and look and see if it's been released anywhere yet. But from the story, and from even all the statements coming in, the first officer who came into the classroom was a black officer, and he's de-escalating the whole situation. And it's apparent, maybe it's becoming apparent to him of what was really happening, and the whole disturbing the peace and disorderly conduct, that doesn't start with the student. It actually started with the teacher. And maybe he's putting these pieces together and starting to figure this out. So he's de-escalating the situation. He's probably still going to have to remove the student in the end. But it's the fact that, putting the pieces together, he's actually investigating and getting both sides of the story. He's getting her side of the story now. And everything's calming down from the statements that are made. It appears that everything's starting to calm down. And then the white officer comes in, who happens to be the supervisor, and he says, you're getting arrested. You have to leave or you're getting arrested. And she turns around and she looks at him, and that just re-escalates the whole thing. You have an officer that's got the situation under control. He's de-escalating it. He's getting it to the point where he can remove her from the class and possibly arrest the teacher for disturbing the peace and disorderly conduct, because she was the very first one to commit the crime of disorderly conduct, not the student. But two professionals, one professional feels the other professional is entitled to break the law, but because the student isn't a professional, she's not entitled to defend herself against the teacher, against the one that originally broke the law. And so that just re-escalates the whole thing. And so that's how it all winds up, where it comes in, where you see this video of her being handcuffed. But that's the bigger issue here. When adults, in this case, yes, the student is an adult. She's 20 years old, but she's a young adult. And here you have the mature adult just disturbing the peace, breaking laws, disorderly conduct. Look it up. I looked it up. Exactly what the student was arrested for is exactly what the teacher did to incite the whole thing. And that's another thing, incitement. I mean, you could argue that it's inciting a riot. The teacher's actions were inciting a riot under the same law, under Winston. I looked it up for Winston-Salem, and It's the same thing. It's pretty much disorderly conduct and then feeding it in and fueling the fire. Why didn't if the adult would have calmed down, but the adult didn't calm down. She argued back with the student. The adult was the one that started the whole argument. The adult was the first one to start yelling and screaming at people. The adult was the first one to break a law. But because the adult is a professional, she gets professional courtesy, and she's allowed to break the law. It's okay for you to break the law, but it's not okay for this one to break the law, even though you both broke the same law. Now, we're gonna arrest the student. Okay, the student, if we're gonna get down and just follow the letter of the law, yes, the student, disorderly conduct per the law. She needs to be arrested. Let's go that route. Let's just completely go that route. Just go to the letter of the law. The student is disorderly conduct. She is breaking the law. Why was not the teacher arrested for disorderly conduct? She broke the law. She was actually the first one to break the law. And even worse, she committed a felony because she was inciting a riot by instigating the student to aggravate the argument. It's called incitement. Why is nobody having that conversation? Like I said, I'm not even completely in disagreement with Nathan Daly's assessment of what he's saying about the student, but he's completely overlooking the they both, he's talking about, well, the student broke the handbook policies for the student handbook, so she broke the law. What about the teacher? The teacher broke the policies as well. The teacher actually was the first one to break the law. And when you look at the age difference, you have a grown adult who incited this whole thing. Like I said, I wish there was a full video of this, because that full video would really put this all. But from all the statements, it was the teacher that started this whole thing. It was the teacher that incited the whole thing. And here you have two professionals. I'm not talking about Nathan Daly. I'm talking about the teacher and the supervisor. They both collaborate to arrest the student and let the teacher get away with breaking the law. That is a problem. That is the problem. It's in the Constitution. All men are created equal. Men means men and women. Men is just an old biblical term. But all men are created equal. So if you're going to arrest this one for disorderly conduct, why aren't you arresting this one for disorderly conduct? As a matter of fact, why aren't you arresting this one for incitement as well? I mean, that's where it all starts. It starts with the adult in the room. Like I said, they're all adults, but you're talking about the professional adult. It was the professional adult that started the whole thing. Why is it if you're a professional, you're not guilty of the crimes you commit, but if you're just a average Joe or an average Jane, then all of a sudden you're guilty of every crime you commit? There's no equality there. And that's the real issue. And people are coming at it the wrong way, I think, from a lot of directions. Some people are, they're seeing the situation for what it is. And I think they're seeing the situation for what it is exactly the same way as me. But instead of just being honest about it in those terms, they're trying to turn it into this race thing. And I really don't think it's a race thing. It's a professional entitlement issue is the problem here. That's the real problem. It's professional entitlement. That is the problem. And it's entitlement in general. I mean, just take the professionalism out of it. It's entitlement. You're entitled to do this, but you're not. Did you never read the Constitution? I'm entitled to do what you're entitled to do. You're entitled to do what I'm entitled to do. But if I'm entitled to do something and it's a breach of the law, then I need to be charged with that breach of the law. But that means you have to be charged with that breach of the law as well. Because we're all entitled to do whatever the hell we want. But if we have laws in the books that say we can't do it, you're entitled to do it, but you're also entitled to pay the consequences. Why isn't the teacher paying you could argue the teacher's paying consequences, but she's not paying the legal consequences. This whole situation would be looked at completely different if the teacher was treated just as equally as the student. There's no equality in how the law is being distributed is the problem. Because like I said, look up the definition of disorderly conduct in Winston-Salem. That's North Carolina, right? I looked it up for Winston-Salem. I didn't even put it in the state. I believe it's North Carolina. But I just looked it up for Winston-Salem. And it also brought up the incitement and inciting a riot. And the teacher's actions fall in that too. You could argue the students' actions fall in that as well. But if the students' actions fall in that, the teacher was the first one to break the law. Arguably, the teacher's the only one that's actually guilty of the incitement because she's the one that started the whole thing. Because she wasn't happy that the student was just going to accept the grade. That is the problem. And that's my problem with that whole case. And that's my problem with that whole situation. You can't hold one person accountable for a law, for a violation of the law, but then tell the other person who did the same exact thing that they're not accountable. That's not equality. That's not even law enforcement. That's not even law enforcement. Law enforcement is you broke the law and you broke the law and you're both going to be arrested. That's enforcement. That's actual enforcement of the law. This isn't even enforcement of the law. This is just it's enforcement of entitlement. Let's be honest, that's what it is. It's not enforcement of the law, it's enforcement of entitlement. This one's entitled and this one isn't. Because this one is entitled, we're not going to arrest this one for disorderly conduct and incitement. But because this one isn't entitled, we're going to arrest this one for disorderly conduct. And that's the problem. That is the problem. And like I said, I'm even watching an officer, and he's not defending the teacher, but he's not pointing out that the teacher broke the law. He's not pointing out that the teacher broke the law. As much as I respect Nathan Daly, he's not pointing out that the teacher broke the law. The teacher was the first one who was committing the crime of disorderly conduct per the description of the law. And that's my problem with it. That's why I'm so upset about it. If they arrested both of them, I'd be like, well, okay. It's equal justice. It's equal law enforcement. It's actual law enforcement. This isn't law enforcement. You can't argue that is law enforcement. Because if it was law enforcement, they'd both be arrested. It's like Someone walks up to you and they punch you in the face. And then you start hitting them back. Now, you could be charged with greater crimes because after you had them down on the ground and you're still pummeling them. But the fact of the matter is, the person who hit you in the first place, they got to be charged with a crime as well because they're the one that instigated the whole thing. They walked up and they hit you. They just came up and they punched you in the face. But you, when you got them down on the ground after you had them under control and you keep pummeling them, it's no longer self-defense. It went from self-defense, which was justifiable, into now assault. That's the same situation. Just here, it's verbal. It's verbal. It's verbal assault. It's not physical assault. But the same rules apply. The person who starts the whole thing, they're just as guilty as the person that's defending themselves. And until law enforcement starts actually practicing law enforcement, that's the problem. How can you look at things and say, well, yeah, it's law enforcement? It's not. Because it's not equal. It's not justifiably equalized. I'm not even going to get into examples like that. But some of the things that they use, I'm not even going to get into the whole what do they call it? I'm drawing a blank now. Basically, amnesty for officers. I'm drawing a blank. But you know what I'm talking about, the amnesty for... I mean, there's cases with that are so horrific, and police are just given a free pass. I mean, I was following a case out in Oklahoma that was just horrible. An officer intimidating witnesses and raping witnesses in some cases, and he got qualified immunity. And he gets qualified immunity because somehow an officer of the law doesn't know that raping a woman is a violation of the law. But that's what I mean. Where's the law? Where is law enforcement? That's not law enforcement. It's entitlement enforcement. I believe in law and order. I think we have too many laws, but I believe in law and order in general. I do think we have too many laws. I think we have too many police on the street. I mean, I'm not saying the cops are any better there. I've been talking with some people, and I'm starting to see that, depending on where you are in England, the cops are just as bad as they are here in America, but the thing I saw was when I was in England, I saw 2 or 3 cops in a matter of a week. In a whole week, I only saw 2 or 3 cops. And I've never felt so secure anywhere in my life. I'm in a foreign country, and I felt more secure in a foreign country than I do walking through streets that I'm familiar with. And I put it together when I came back home because I saw the first cop, and I didn't think much about it. And then a couple minutes later, I see another cop. Then a couple minutes later, I see another cop. And I was like, damn, we live in a really dangerous country. I'm surrounded by criminals. I got to watch over my back constantly. That's why all these police are here. Because there's that many criminals around me. I mean, that's the problem with so many cops. People don't realize it because it's subconscious. But once you get out of that, you become conscious of it. And I never realized that how stressed out I was just walking the streets. But you know, we need, I'm not, you know, we need to fix some things in law enforcement, but the biggest thing we need to fix is actually law enforcement. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton. She has all these top secret papers sitting on a computer in a bathroom, was it? And that's okay, no big deal. Then you got another young man who, just standing in the hallway of his submarine, takes a selfie of himself and sends it to family, and he's going to prison, to Fort Knox, for being in possession of top secret information. They didn't even charge him with the sharing, they just charged him with being in possession of top secret information. One photo, one selfie, and there's nothing in the background. But because it's in a top secret sub, that's all that mattered. But here, you have the rich white woman. Oh, it's okay for her. I mean, even Maxine Waters. Look at everything Maxine Waters goes. I'm no way defending Maxine Waters. I mean, but here she is. She's a black woman. And look at everything she's going through. And yet, it's all right for Hillary Clinton to sell uranium to the Russians. That's okay. But this woman, you know, she's got to be thrown through the ringer because she's a black woman. I mean, there's some things where you can't dismiss that. It's got to be race. What else is it? They're both politicians. They're both powerful. One's white and one's black. White one gets away with everything in the sun. The black one, she bought some Beyonce tickets or something using campaign funds. And she's charged like the biggest criminal in the United States. Even by her own party. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm not a progressive, I'm a liberal. Very big difference between the two. I know everybody's not taught that anymore, but there is. But she's treated like a criminal, and Hillary Clinton's given a pass. That's not law enforcement. That's entitlement. That's entitlement enforcement. You're entitled and you're not. Until they stop entitlement enforcement, how can anybody respect law enforcement? If it's not law enforcement, you can't respect law enforcement that is not law enforcement. I'm sorry. I'm somebody I respect. I respect law and order. But like I said, how can I can't justify it. I can't justify something that's not law and order. I can't defend entitlement enforcement. And that's what is the big problem. And everybody keeps trying to point out this about, you know, it's all racist and this and that. A lot of this stuff has nothing to do with race. Some of it does, like I said, like Maxine Waters and Hillary Clinton example. When you look at those two examples, you know, you can't. It's kind of hard not to argue that there's got to be a race element there because they're both up here on these big, powerful politicians, but they're treated completely differently. There, you could actually argue that, you know, it's more than just entitlement. It's also, there's a race element there. But with this teacher and this student, they're both minorities. So now it just comes down to entitlement enforcement. The teacher's entitled. You're not. Therefore, you're being arrested. The teacher's allowed to break the law. You're not. Yes, the teacher committed disorderly conduct. She incited the whole argument. That's besides the point. She's entitled. You're not. That's what that's all coming down to. And that's what a lot of the situation that we see today is coming down to. Because, I mean, let's face it, you get two people pulled over. One's a DA. One's... Actually, yeah. I'll give you a perfect example. You have two people pulled over in the same jurisdiction by the same police officer. One's a DA. One's a pilot. Both get pulled over, well, actually, one was already pulled over. We'll get into the whole detail. But they're both being investigated for DWI. The pilot, he agrees to blow into the breathalyzer. He blows into the breathalyzer, blows a 0.000. He gets arrested for DWI. His whole life gets turned upside down. His profession, because of that DWI arrest, gets completely destroyed. His whole career gets destroyed. And then after leaving, he goes and he takes follow-up tests. There's no drugs in his system. There's no alcohol in his system. There's nothing in his system. Nothing comes up in any of the blood work. Completely clean. He was just lost. Like he said, I'm lost. I'm looking for where I'm going. That's why he was driving under the speed limit. He wasn't sure where he was. But he gets arrested for DUI and taken to jail and processed. Now the DA, he's on the side of the street. Can't remember. I believe his car was smashed into something. Not positive of that. I don't remember if it was a sign or... But I'm pretty sure he hit something. He's pissed himself. He's reeking of alcohol. There's, I guess it was like $150, $200 bottle of whiskey on the side of the road, only feet from his car. And they let him go. The same officer let him go. No big deal. Just DA. That's the problem. It's not law enforcement. That's entitlement enforcement. That is the problem. Until we get past entitlement enforcement, yeah, you can't expect people to respect the law. Because people see that. They're not blind. Some people, they use especially race baiters, they love starting it off with racism, but most of the time it's not racism, it's just actual entitlement. It's who the officer feels is entitled. And then we also have the whole situation in America where, definitions don't mean anything anymore, because there's a lot of people that are called racist that aren't racist. They might be bigots. Abraham Lincoln was a bigot. Wasn't a racist, but he was a bigot. But people don't know the definition of a bigot and a racist. There's a very big difference between the two. And in all honesty, you could be a bigot as a police officer and still enforce the law equally. Because you're a bigot, you're not a racist. That's a racist is someone like Hitler who feels that one race is superior than all other races. That's a racist. A racist feels that race has no right to exist. That race feels that it's all right to dismantle and destroy and kill everybody in that race. That's a racist. A bigot just don't like people of a race, religion, ethnicity, whatever it is. You could be a bigot because you don't like gay people. You think all gay people are horrible people. That's bigotry. You think all black people are horrible people. That's bigotry. You think all white people are horrible people. That's bigotry. You think all Catholics are horrible people. That's bigotry. Bigotry is universal. I can show you lots of black bigots, white bigots, Catholic bigots, Protestant bigots, Irish bigots, German bigots, American bigots, all the way across the board. However you want to, but that's bigotry. Yes, that's a worldwide problem. But as far as racism, I don't even think that had anything to do with racism. I don't think the white supervisor was racist. Was he a bigot? Is he a bigot? I don't know. I don't have enough information to make that assessment, but I don't think he's a racist. I think he just believes in entitlement. And he just felt the professor was entitled to break the law and the student wasn't entitled to break the law. And so he enforced the law based on entitlement. It's obvious, actually. You can't argue it. So, they're two very different things. And it's just like I said, law enforcement. Law enforcement is treated equally. Entitlement enforcement is treated according to who you feel is entitled. I think that's what we have here, is entitlement enforcement. It's what we have a lot of going on in law enforcement right now. Most of the problems that are being classified as racist, they're not really racist, I don't think. I think they're entitlement. Like, I'll give you another extreme example. It was in Texas at the pool party. You have the black girl who's coming from a poor part of the neighborhood. Apparently they were living on Section 8, I heard. I don't know how correct that is. It could be wrong. But because she's coming from the lower side of the neighborhood, it doesn't matter what all started it. She's just completely wrong. They didn't do anything to. Apparently, it all started with some preppy, rich white kids that started the whole thing. But that's not about racism. That's about entitlement. If we're going to argue it, let's argue it correctly. Is there a problem with racism? I'm not saying there's not a problem with racism in America. Like I said, I'm black, white, and American Indian. Don't even get me started. Ironically, one of the most disgusting racist things that ever happened to me was by a group of black men. A couple old black men. They knew what I was. They could tell what I was. I was in a diner. This is when I first started driving truck. I was in North Alabama. I believe it was North Alabama. It was a long time ago, but it was in Alabama. And they knew what I was. So they sent me a glass of chocolate milk. Black people, they already know exactly what that means. Some white people might not. That the white milk is white, add chocolate to it, chocolate's brown. It's very racist and disgusting, and it started with a whole argument. Wound up coming into a whole argument. They were ready to fucking start throwing down with me, beat me up, take me out, and lynch me up in a tree. It was actually the black diner owner who defended me. Kicked them out. He was upset with them. He yelled at them. He's like, coming here for years, what the hell is wrong with you? And he kicked them out. I was the new guy on the block. He defended me. Because it was disgustingly racist. And ironically, on the other side of the coin, I used to like wearing the Southern Pride shirts. The Southern Pride shirts happen to have the Confederate flag on it. But Southern pride isn't about racism. Southern pride is about things that come from the South. When I thought of Southern pride, I thought of people. Oh, I can't remember her name now. Not Mrs. Parks. It's the one before her. Colleen something. She was actually the first one to refuse to get on the back of the bus, but she just wasn't a good fit for her. So she was just overlooked. And then people like Bo Diddley, Memphis Slim. I love blues music. So, when I think of Southern pride, I'm thinking most of my thoughts of Southern pride are actually about music. But it happens to be paying heritage to black musicians. But that was always my take on what Southern pride meant. People look at Southern pride differently. Are there people that look at Southern pride racistly? Yes, there are. But most people, they don't look at Southern pride through the eyes of racism. They're looking at it as the heritage. Turnip greens, barbecue, gator hunting, blues music, Mississippi Delta blues, But because I was wearing a Southern pride shirt, I met somebody from the Brotherhood of the is it the Confederate Brotherhood or the Brotherhood of the Confederacy? And he starts talking to me, and he told me, he said the reason he came up to me, he says, I noticed your shirt. Yeah, And so he told me who he was from. And as soon as he said who he was from, I looked at him, I said, well, I'm not white. He's like, huh? I said, I'm not white. I'm black, white, and American Indian. He says, I don't care about that. He says, I see the shirt, Southern pride, And we got talking about it, and I told him what my take on Southern pride was. And he actually agreed with it. He said that, he has some different takes than me, but he says he actually respected it, and he agreed with it. We actually had a civil conversation. So here I am, pretty much all in the same area of the country. I meet somebody who people would expect to be a racist, and we have a civil conversation. And then I meet people that, I would never expect that kind of disrespect from, and they send me a glass of chocolate milk. So, anyone who's ever told you black people can't be racist, they're very deluded. But in general, the problem in this country isn't racism. It's entitlement. And it's not entitlement the way we think of it with the snowflake generation. There is a difference in entitlement there. I'll agree with that. But it's not that. It's just this whole ingrained practice of entitlement that goes way beyond just the entitlement of millennials. It goes way beyond that. It's an ingrained culture in our country. You're a CEO, you're entitled. You're a street sweeper? No. You're not entitled. And that's the whole situation. And that's what we see going on there at the BCU college. At the HBCU, Heritage Black College University. That's what we see going on there. That's what that's really about. That's about entitlement. That's not about racism. It's about entitlement. And the whole way the law is being enforced. It's not law enforcement, it's entitlement enforcement. I mean, if we're going to have the conversation, let's have the conversation and be honest about it. What is going on there? That's what you see, is entitlement enforcement. So, Sure, a lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people aren't going to be happy with the way that I'm laying it out because it doesn't fit their narrative that they want it pushed as. I'm sure even, Nathan Daly probably going to disagree with me. Then again, he might disagree with me on some of it and agree with me on other parts of it. I've actually sent him videos. I sent him a video where I was defending the cop. And then he sent me an email back explaining to me why the cop was wrong. But I was defending the cop. I thought the cop was in the right. And he explained to me why the cop was in the wrong. So, I respect what he says, and I take what he says as being completely honest because he's been honest with me. I mean, it would have been easy for him to defend the cop in that video that I sent him because I told him why I thought the cop was all in the right and everything. I told him what I was seeing, and it explained, it really opened my eyes differently to perspective because there is a perspective we have of things. And so it opened my eyes to that, so I'm more aware of my personal perspective of things now. And so I try to put that on the sideline when I see it. I say, okay, am I seeing this through my perspective or am I seeing this the way that I think I'm seeing it? And when I realize that it's my perspective that I'm seeing it through, then I put the perspective on the side and then I go back and I watch it again. But that whole situation in Winston-Salem, I really believe that's what we're looking at, is entitlement enforcement. And if we're going to be honest and start having the conversation, that's where we should be starting. Because that's the bigger problem. That's a much bigger problem than racism in America, is entitlement. And it's not just entitlement as, being seen by the millennials. It's entitlement that has been there for a very long time. You're entitled and you're not. You both committed the same crime, but because you're entitled, that's okay. You're not entitled, it's not okay. That's what I see going on up there.